The day aliens made first contact with Earth, nobody expected what would happen next. After months of careful communication through radio signals and mathematical equations, the Valorian Empire finally revealed themselves. Their ships appeared in our skies like floating cities made of crystalline light. People around the world watched their screens, some excited, some terrified, all curious about what this meant for humanity. The Valorians looked humanoid but different. Their skin had this beautiful purple tint that seemed to glow slightly under light. They were tall, elegant, and their technology was centuries ahead of ours. Their leader, Emperor Zalthor, addressed the United Earth Council through a holographic projection. He stood there with his sharp features and cold eyes, speaking about peace, cooperation, and building bridges between civilizations. To show our commitment to this alliance, the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the council chambers, we propose a traditional union, a marriage between our worlds. The council members looked at each other nervously. This was unexpected. Marriage between species? But the diplomats understood what this really meant. It was politics, a symbolic gesture that would tie Earth and Valoria together in a way that couldn't easily be broken. After days of debate and discussion, they agreed. Earth would send forward someone from their diplomatic corps to accept this arrangement. That someone was Daniel Park, a 35-year-old translator and cultural liaison officer. Daniel wasn't your typical diplomat. He was quiet, thoughtful, and honestly a bit awkward at formal events. He'd lost his wife Lisa 3 years ago to an illness, and since then, he'd thrown himself into his work, learning languages, studying alien cultures, anything to keep his mind busy. He had a daughter, 7-year-old Sophie, who meant everything to him. Sophie had her mother's bright smile and curious nature. When they told Daniel about the arranged marriage, he sat in that meeting room for a long time without saying anything. You want me to marry an alien princess, he finally said, not quite believing the words coming out of his own mouth. For humanity. We know it's asking a lot, the council leader said gently. But you're perfect for this. You understand cultural differences better than anyone. You're patient, kind, and you've shown incredible strength through personal loss. You don't have to decide right now. But Daniel knew he would say yes, not because he wanted to remarry. The thought of that still hurt. Still felt like he'd be replacing Lisa somehow, but he'd do it for Sophie's future, for humanity's future. So he agreed, even though his heart wasn't in it. Back on Valoria, things were very different. Emperor Zalthor sat in his throne room with his advisors, and they were laughing. Actually laughing about the whole thing. You see, on their world, there were very specific ideas about beauty and worth. Valorians prized thin, angular bodies. The thinner you were, the more elegant you were considered. It was their culture, their standard, and anyone who didn't fit that mold was looked down upon. The Emperor had 4 children, and 3 of them fit perfectly into what Valorian society expected. But his eldest daughter, Princess Lyra, didn't. She had always been bigger than other Valorians, rounder, softer. And in a society that valued sharp lines and thin frames, she was considered a disgrace. Her own father barely looked at her during royal functions. Her siblings avoided being seen with her in public. The palace servants whispered when she walked by. Lyra had spent her whole life being told she wasn't good enough, that she was an embarrassment to the royal family. She'd learned to make herself small, to hide in libraries and gardens, to avoid social situations where people would judge her. She'd buried herself in books, learning about mathematics, literature, quantum physics, anything to prove she had value beyond her appearance. But it never mattered to her father. When Emperor Zalthor learned about Earth's agreement to the marriage proposal, he saw an opportunity. Not for peace or alliance, but for a joke. A cruel joke that would let him get rid of his embarrassing daughter while making himself look generous. Send Lyra, he told his advisors, that cold smile on his face. Send her to Earth. Let's see how these primitive humans react when we give them our worst. They think they're getting a beautiful princess? They'll get exactly what they deserve for thinking they're worthy of an alliance with us. His advisors shifted uncomfortably. Some of them didn't like this plan, but nobody dared speak against the Emperor, so they made the arrangements. They prepared Lyra's ship, packed her belongings, and told her she was being sent to Earth for a diplomatic marriage. Lyra stood in her chambers, looking at the blue planet on her viewing screen. Earth. She'd read about it, studied its cultures, found their diversity fascinating. But she knew why she was really being sent. Her father's assistant had accidentally let it slip. This wasn't an honor. This was exile wrapped in diplomatic paper. Her father was sending her away because he was ashamed of her, and he expected the humans to reject her, to send her back in disgrace, proving his point that she was worthless. For the first time in years, Lyra cried. Not because she was leaving Valoria. She'd be happy to never see that palace again. But because even now, even in what should have been an important moment, her father was using her as a punchline to his joke. The day of Lyra's arrival, media from around the world gathered at the landing site. Humans were curious, excited even. They'd seen images of Valorians and thought they looked amazing. There was genuine hope that this marriage, weird as it was, might lead to friendship between worlds. Daniel stood there in his formal suit, Sophie holding his hand. She was bouncing with excitement. "Do you think she'll like me, Dad? Do you think she'll teach me about her planet?" "I'm sure she will, sweetheart," Daniel said, though his stomach was in knots. He was about to meet the woman he was supposed to marry, an alien from a completely different world, and he had no idea what to expect. The Valorian ship landed smoothly, its surface shimmering. A ramp extended and everyone held their breath. But then something happened that nobody anticipated. A transmission came through. A message from Emperor Zalthor that was supposed to be private communication to his advisors, but got accidentally broadcast to everyone present. The Emperor's face appeared on screens, and he was laughing. Did they really accept perfect? "I've sent them Lyra, my fat failure of a daughter. Let's see how long it takes before they realize what a joke this all is. Maybe they'll finally understand their place in the galaxy when they see what we think they're worth." The transmission cut off, but the damage was done. Every reporter, every diplomat, every person watching around the world had heard it. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the anger, the outrage. How dare he? How dare this alien emperor insult not just his own daughter, but humanity itself? Daniel felt something hot rising in his chest. Not embarrassment. Anger. Pure anger at this cruel, pompous man who would treat his own child like garbage just to make a point. The ship's door opened, and Princess Lyra stepped out. She moved gracefully despite clearly being nervous. Her purple skin catching the sunlight beautifully, she wore elegant robes that combined structure with flow. And yes, she was bigger than the other Valorians they'd seen in broadcasts. But she wasn't what her father had described. She was beautiful in her own way, with kind eyes that looked scared and hopeful at the same time. Lyra had heard the broadcast too. Everyone had. She stood there at the top of the ramp, frozen, waiting for the rejection, the laughter, the confirmation of everything her father had always said about her. But Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't look disappointed or disgusted. Instead, he walked forward, Sophie still holding his hand. And when he reached the bottom of the ramp, he did something that surprised everyone, especially Lyra. He bowed. A deep, respectful bow. Then he looked up at her with genuine warmth in his eyes and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Welcome to Earth, Princess Lyra. I apologize on behalf of humanity that you had to endure such disrespect from your own father. But I want you to know something right now. Here you'll be treated with the dignity and respect you deserve. Not because of some alliance, but because that's what every person deserves. We're honored to have you here." Lyra's eyes widened. She descended the ramp slowly, hardly believing what she was hearing. Sophie let go of her father's hand and ran forward, stopping just in front of Lyra, looking up at her with pure excitement. "You're really a princess from space? That's so cool! Do you want to be friends? I can show you my favorite park and my school, and maybe you can tell me about your planet." Something broke inside Lyra at that moment. This small human child looking at her with no judgment, no disgust, just pure innocent curiosity and kindness. She knelt down to Sophie's level, tears forming in her eyes. "I would love that very much," Lyra said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel helped her stand, and as their eyes met, something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of shared pain. He'd lost someone he loved. She'd never had anyone love her. But in that moment, both of them felt something shift. Like maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation might turn into something neither of them expected. As they walked together toward the transport vehicles, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing everywhere, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real. Genuine. The diplomatic residence they'd prepared for Lyra was nice, but she barely noticed it. Everything felt overwhelming. After the public welcome ceremony, after the speeches and the formal introductions, she finally found herself alone in her quarters. The rooms were spacious, decorated with what humans considered elegant, and there was a large window overlooking a garden below. She stood there, still wearing her formal robes, trying to process what had just happened. Back home, her father's message would be spreading through Valorian networks by now. Everyone would know what he'd said about her, what he'd called her. The shame she'd carried privately her whole life was now public across multiple worlds. But something else confused her even more. The humans hadn't reacted the way her father predicted. They'd been angry, yes, but not at her. For her. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Princess Lyra?" Daniel's voice came from the other side. "May I come in? I thought you might want some company. Or if you'd prefer to be alone, that's completely fine too." Lyra took a breath. "You can come in." Daniel entered, and he'd changed from his formal suit into more casual clothes, regular pants, and a simple shirt. Somehow that made her feel a bit better. He was carrying a tray with 2 cups. "I wasn't sure if you could drink our tea, but our scientists said Valorian biology can handle most of our foods. It's chamomile. It's supposed to be calming, though honestly I think that's mostly in our heads." He set the tray down on a small table and gestured to the chairs. Lyra sat, accepting the cup carefully. The warmth felt good in her hands. Daniel sat across from her, leaving respectful distance between them. "I wanted to apologize," he said after a moment. "This whole situation must be incredibly difficult for you. Coming to a strange planet, dealing with what your father said, and then being thrown into a marriage arrangement with someone you've never met. I want you to know that I'm not going to pressure you into anything. We can take this at whatever pace you're comfortable with." Lyra looked at him, really looked at him. He had kind eyes, tired eyes. There were small lines around them that suggested he smiled often, or used to. His dark hair was starting to show hints of gray at the temples. He looked genuine, and that scared her almost more than cruelty would have. She didn't know how to handle kindness. "Why did you defend me?" she asked quietly. "Out there, in front of everyone. You could have been embarrassed. You could have asked for a different arrangement." Daniel took a sip of his tea, considering his words carefully. "Because what your father did was wrong. Simple as that. And because nobody deserves to be treated the way he treated you, especially not by their own parent." He paused, his expression softening. "And honestly, I looked up at you standing there, scared but trying to be brave, and all I could think was that you deserved better. You deserved someone to stand up for you." Lyra felt tears threatening again. She'd cried more today than she had in years. "On Valoria, I'm considered ugly, unworthy. My whole life I've been told I'm an embarrassment to my family because of how I look. And now billions of beings across multiple planets know my own father thinks I'm worthless. Then your planet has some seriously messed up beauty standards," Daniel said bluntly, and Lyra's eyes widened at his directness. "Sorry that was diplomatic of me, but it's true. You're not ugly, Lyra, not even close. But more importantly, even if you were, it wouldn't matter. Your worth isn't determined by your appearance. It's determined by who you are, how you treat others, what you contribute to the world." "That's easy to say when you fit your society's standards," Lyra said, a bit of bitterness creeping into her voice. Daniel smiled sadly. "You think I fit Earth's standards? I'm too short according to some people, too quiet, too bookish. I got bullied in school for being the kid who'd rather read than play sports. My wife used to joke that she married the least cool diplomat in the entire Corps." His smile faded a bit. "People judge. That's what they do. But the people worth knowing, they look deeper." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both sipping their tea. Lyra could feel some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Tell me about your daughter," she said, wanting to change the subject. "Sophie, she seems very energetic." Daniel's whole face lit up. "She's amazing. Smart, curious, sees the good in everything. She got that from her mom." His expression flickered with pain for just a second. "Lisa passed away 3 years ago. Illness, it was fast and we weren't ready. Sophie was only 4. Since then, it's been just the 2 of us figuring things out together." "I'm sorry," Lyra said softly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. Still is sometimes. But Sophie keeps me going. She's excited to meet you properly, by the way. She's been reading everything she can find about Valoria. She probably knows more facts about your planet than I do now." Over the next few days, Lyra started settling into her new life. Daniel kept his word about not pressuring her. They had separate quarters, and he always asked permission before visiting. He'd stop by in the mornings to have breakfast and talk about the day ahead. Sometimes Sophie would join them, chattering away about school or asking Lyra questions about space travel. What surprised Lyra most was how normal they made her feel. Daniel would ask about her interests, her studies. When she mentioned she'd studied quantum mathematics, his eyes got wide. "You understand quantum math? That's incredible. We've been trying to figure out how your ships travel faster than light. Would you be willing to look at some of our scientists' theories? They'd be honored to learn from you." Nobody had ever valued her intelligence before. On Valoria, her academic achievements were dismissed because of her appearance. But here, Daniel listened when she talked about complex mathematical concepts. He didn't understand all of it, he admitted that freely, but he was genuinely interested. He'd ask questions, trying to follow her explanations, and when she'd simplify things for him, he'd thank her for her patience. Sophie was even more straightforward in her acceptance. One afternoon, she burst into Lyra's quarters all excited. Lyra, can you teach me some Valorian words? My class is doing a presentation on alien cultures and I want to surprise everyone." Lyra found herself smiling, really smiling for the first time in forever. "Of course. Come sit and we'll start with basic phrases." Daniel found them an hour later, Sophie practicing pronunciation while Lyra patiently corrected her, both of them laughing when Sophie got tongue-tied on the more complex sounds. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching, and Lyra caught the look on his face. Something soft, something warm. Later that evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Daniel invited Lyra to walk in the garden. The Earth sun was setting, painting the sky in colors Lyra had never seen before. Valoria had 3 moons but only 1 sun, and it burned white. Earth's sun was golden, and the sunset was this incredible mix of orange, pink, and purple. "It's beautiful," Lyra breathed, stopping to watch. "Yeah," Daniel said, but when Lyra glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the sky. He quickly shifted his gaze. "We have sunsets like this fairly often. Different every time, though. No two are exactly alike." They walked along the garden path, the air cooling as evening settled in. Lyra could smell flowers she didn't recognize, sweet and fresh. "Can I ask you something personal?" Daniel said after a while. "You can ask. I might not answer, but you can ask. What do you want? Not what your father wants, not what the Alliance needs. What do you want for yourself?" Nobody had ever asked her that before. Lyra stopped walking, really thinking about it. "I want to be seen," she said finally. "Not as the Emperor's disappointing daughter, not as a political tool, not as someone's joke, just as me. Lyra. The person who loves learning, who thinks about the universe in the quiet hours, who wants to matter to someone." Daniel nodded slowly. "You matter to Sophie already. She told me tonight that you're the coolest person she's ever met." He smiled. "And for what it's worth, you matter to me too. I know we barely know each other, but I see you, Lyra, the real you, and I like what I see." Lyra's heart did something strange in her chest. "You barely know me," she echoed his words, but weakly. "Then let me get to know you better. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people figuring out if they can be friends, and maybe eventually something more, but only if you want that." They continued walking, and Lyra realized something had shifted. She wasn't just tolerating this arrangement anymore. She was starting to hope for it, starting to imagine what it might be like to build a life here, with this kind man and his wonderful daughter. Back on Valoria, the response to Emperor Zalthor's broadcast was not what he expected. Some of his advisors were reporting unusual activity. Citizens were talking, questioning. Why had the Emperor been so cruel to his own daughter? What did it say about him as a leader? And the other alien species in their alliance network were sending diplomatic messages, expressing concern about Zalthor's behavior. But the Emperor dismissed it all. They were insects, all of them. He'd show them soon enough that he was right. On Earth, though, something beautiful was beginning. Lyra started teaching regular classes on Valorian culture and language at the local university. Students flocked to her lectures. She was brilliant, patient, and her enthusiasm for teaching was contagious. Daniel would sometimes sit in on her classes, watching her come. Part 3. The weeks turned into months, and something remarkable was happening. Lyra wasn't just adjusting to Earth, she was thriving. Every morning she'd wake up excited about the day ahead instead of dreading it. She'd started wearing a mix of Valorian and Earth clothing, creating her own unique style that students at the university began copying. Her lectures were always packed, and she'd made real friends among the faculty members who valued her mind and her kindness. But the most significant change was happening in the quiet moments. The evenings when Daniel would come home from his diplomatic meetings and find Lyra helping Sophie with homework. The weekend mornings when they'd all cook breakfast together, Lyra teaching them Valorian recipes while Daniel showed her how to make pancakes. The late nights when Sophie was asleep and Daniel and Lyra would sit in the living room, talking about everything and nothing. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel took them both to the ocean. Lyra had seen images of Earth's waters, but nothing prepared her for the real thing. She stood on the beach, the sand warm under her feet, watching waves crash against the shore. The smell of salt air, the cry of seabirds, the endless blue stretching to the horizon. Valoria had no oceans. Their water was contained in lakes and underground reservoirs. "It's incredible," she whispered, and Daniel smiled at her reaction. Sophie was already running toward the water, laughing as small waves chased her feet. "Come on, Lyra. It's so fun." Lyra looked uncertain. "I don't know how to swim." "That's okay," Daniel said gently. "We'll stay in the shallow part. I'll be right there with you." So Lyra walked into the ocean for the first time in her life, Daniel beside her, holding her hand when a bigger wave came. The water was cool, refreshing, and when she laughed at the sensation of sand shifting under her feet, Daniel realized it was the first time he'd heard her laugh freely, without any shadow of pain behind it. They spent hours there, building sandcastles with Sophie, collecting shells, watching the sunset paint the sky in those colors Lyra loved. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted and happy. Daniel glanced at Lyra in the passenger seat, her purple skin glowing softly in the dashboard lights. "Thank you for today," Lyra said quietly. "I've never felt so free." "You deserve to feel free every day," Daniel replied. "You deserve to be happy." That night, after they'd gotten Sophie to bed, Daniel and Lyra sat on the porch, the evening warm around them. They'd been sitting closer lately, the formal distance between them shrinking naturally over time. "Can I tell you something?" Lyra said, her voice soft. "Something I haven't told anyone?" "Of course. When I was younger, maybe 12 in Earth years, I tried to change myself. I stopped eating, exercised until I collapsed, anything to fit what Valoria wanted me to be. My father barely noticed. My siblings avoided me even more because I became irritable and sick. It took a palace doctor confronting me to make me stop, and even then she did it secretly because my father would have been angry she interfered." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Lyra, I'm so sorry. I'm telling you this because being here with you and Sophie, I've realized something. I spent so much of my life trying to disappear, trying to be invisible, trying to take up less space. But you make me feel like I'm allowed to exist fully. You see me and you don't look away. That's everything to me." Daniel turned to face her fully. "You know what I see when I look at you? I see someone brilliant who can explain quantum physics and then turn around and patiently teach a 7-year-old basic math. I see someone who's been through so much pain, but still chooses kindness. I see someone who makes my daughter laugh, who's brought joy back into our home. I see someone who makes me feel alive again after 3 years of just going through the motions." Lyra's breath caught. "Daniel, I know this started as an arrangement, political necessity, but it's become so much more than that, at least for me. I care about you, Lyra. Not Princess Lyra, not the Alliance representative. Just you. The person who steals extra cookies when she thinks I'm not looking. Who talks to the plants in the garden. Who watches Earth documentaries at 2 in the morning because you're too excited to sleep." Lyra laughed, a bit watery. "You knew about the cookies. I've known for weeks. I started buying extra just for you." He smiled, then grew serious again. "I'm falling for you. I need you to know that. And I need you to know that there's no pressure. If you don't feel the same way, we can keep things as they are. But I couldn't go another day without being honest." Lyra looked at him. This man who'd shown her what it felt like to be valued, to be wanted, to be loved, not despite who she was, but because of it. "I feel the same way," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying not to. I kept telling myself it was too fast, too complicated. But every day I spend with you, I fall a little more. You and Sophie have given me something I never thought I'd have. A home, a family." Daniel reached up, gently touching her face, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes, When she opened them again, he was looking at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded, and when their lips met, it was gentle, sweet, perfect. Not their first kiss, but their first real kiss. One not driven by obligation, but by genuine feeling. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. From that night on, everything changed. They stopped pretending this was just an arrangement. They started holding hands in public, sitting close during Sophie's school events, sharing their lives fully. Sophie was delighted, immediately asking if this meant Lyra was going to be her new mom. Lyra, crying happy tears, said she'd be honored. But happiness on Earth didn't mean happiness everywhere else. Back on Valoria, Emperor Zalthor was watching everything unfold, and he was furious. The reports coming back showed his daughter thriving, respected, loved even. Earth wasn't rejecting her. They'd embraced her. His joke had become a love story that was being broadcast across allied worlds, and it was making him look like the villain. Worse, his own people were starting to question him. Why had he been so cruel to his daughter? What kind of leader treated his own child as disposable? Protests were starting on Valoria, small at first but growing. People who'd felt oppressed by the rigid beauty standards were speaking up. Lyra's courage in staying on Earth despite her father's humiliation was inspiring Valorians to challenge the status quo. Emperor Zalthor couldn't allow this to continue. He called an emergency council meeting. "My daughter has betrayed her people," he announced to his advisors. "She's chosen primitive humans over her own kind. This cannot stand. I'm issuing an ultimatum. She returns home immediately to fulfill her duty to Valoria, or I'll consider her actions an act of treason. And if Earth refuses to return her, it will be considered an act of war." His advisors shifted nervously. "Your Majesty," one brave soul spoke up. "Perhaps this is hasty. The princess seems happy on Earth. The alliance is stronger than ever. Starting a conflict over this, are you questioning me?" The Emperor's voice was ice. "No, Your Majesty. Forgive me." The ultimatum was sent. When it reached Earth's council, they immediately called Daniel and Lyra in for a meeting. The mood was tense. The council leader looked exhausted. "We received this an hour ago. Emperor Zalthor demands Princess Lyra's return. He's threatening war if we don't comply." Lyra felt her stomach drop. She'd known this moment might come, but she'd hoped her father would let her go. Clearly, that was naive. Daniel's hand found hers under the table, squeezing tight. "What are our options?" he asked. "Limited," the council leader admitted. "Valoria's military is more advanced than ours. A war would be devastating. But we won't force Princess Lyra to leave if she doesn't want to. That's her choice." All eyes turned to Lyra. She felt the weight of it, the impossible decision. Stay and risk war between worlds. Leave and return to a life of misery. She thought about Sophie, who'd started calling her mom. About Daniel, who'd shown her what love really meant. About the life she'd built here, the person she'd become. "I won't go back," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I won't let my father bully me anymore, and I won't let him bully Earth. There has to be another way." "There might be," another council member said. "If you were to publicly renounce your claim to the Valorian throne and formally request asylum on Earth, it would change the political situation. You'd no longer be a Valorian princess, but an Earth resident. Your father couldn't demand your return without violating interstellar asylum laws, but it would mean giving up any connection to Valoria," the council leader added. "No going back, no reconciliation with your family. You'd be choosing Earth permanently." Lyra looked at Daniel, at the hope and fear mixed in his eyes. She thought about Sophie, probably at school right now, drawing pictures of their family that included Lyra with hearts around her. She thought about the ocean, the sunsets, the feeling of being valued for who she was. "I choose Earth," she said firmly. "I choose this life, and I want everyone to know why." They scheduled a broadcast for the next day. News outlets across multiple worlds would carry it. Lyra spent that evening with Daniel and Sophie, holding them close, gathering strength from their love. When the time came, Lyra stood before the cameras, Daniel beside her for support, but letting her stand alone in the spotlight.